My name is Victoria Hayes, and until 26 hours ago, I was the Global Operations Director at Titan Manufacturing Corporation, responsible for keeping 3 enormous production facilities across North America moving in perfect sync and generating $5.2 billion in annual revenue. For 11 years, I designed, refined, and guarded the operational spine of Titan's automotive supply chain, the invisible machinery that made just-in-time delivery possible and kept vendors, manufacturers, and internal teams aligned to the minute. I managed the relationships no one else bothered to learn, the schedules no one else could balance, and the crises that never made it into executive summaries because I solved them before they became disasters. What I never imagined was that the CEO, Daniel Blackwood, would decide that all of that experience was suddenly unnecessary at exactly 10:05 a.m. on a Tuesday. He delivered the news in a phone call that lasted 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Apparently, when you're the only person capable of coordinating 3 plants, 14 major suppliers, and 42 automotive manufacturers, you become too essential to appreciate and too inconvenient to retain. That single miscalculation was about to cost Titan Manufacturing more money than Daniel Blackwood had earned in his entire career, and teach the automotive industry a painful lesson about the difference between executive titles and operational reality. The call that ended my career came while I was sitting in my home office, reviewing live production schedules for a critical Honda shipment that had to leave by 6 a.m. sharp. That wasn't unusual. Automotive manufacturing survives on razor-thin margins and brutal deadlines, which means someone always has to be watching the overnight shifts when problems arise. For 11 years, that someone had been me. "Victoria, this is Daniel," he said, his voice carrying the flat, rehearsed calm executives use when they're reading from a script written by legal and HR. "I need to inform you of an immediate organizational restructuring that affects your position." I'd heard that tone before, during the quarterly layoffs that had become standard under his leadership. "What kind of restructuring?" I asked, already running contingency calculations in my head as production metrics scrolled across my monitors. "Your position as Global Operations Director is being eliminated effective immediately. We're consolidating operational oversight under a new Vice President of Strategic Manufacturing who brings a more streamlined approach to production management." Streamlined approach? Corporate shorthand for, we hired someone cheaper who doesn't actually understand how anything works. "Daniel, I'm managing 3 active production crises and a time-sensitive delivery schedule. Can this wait until normal business hours?" "I'm afraid not. The decision has been finalized and must be implemented immediately for administrative efficiency." Administrative efficiency? He said at 10:05 a.m., while production lines across 3 states were running overnight shifts with multiple unresolved issues that required constant coordination. "Marcus is fully prepared to handle any operational challenges. We wouldn't make this change if we weren't confident." I stared at my screens showing live data from Detroit, Atlanta, and Phoenix, equipment alerts, supplier delays, quality flags, dozens of decisions waiting for someone who understood how every moving piece affected the rest. "I understand," I said. "Do you need me to brief Marcus on the current operational status?" "That won't be necessary. He prefers to assess situations independently rather than inherit previous management assumptions." Assumptions like knowing which suppliers needed special handling, which machines were prone to failure under certain loads, and which clients had zero tolerance for delays. "I'll transfer my access credentials within the hour." "Excellent. HR will contact you tomorrow about transition documentation and final administrative details." The call ended at 10:08 a.m., 3 minutes and 47 seconds to erase 11 years of operational expertise in the middle of an active production crisis. I leaned back in my chair, staring at systems I'd built and protected that would soon belong to someone else. Marcus Caney, whoever he was about to learn that managing Titan's operations required more than strategic buzzwords and a fresh perspective. But that was Daniel Blackwood's decision, not mine. He had decided experience was expensive and replaceable. Now he was about to find out how wrong he was. There's something almost comical about midnight terminations. They usually happen when leadership wants to avoid the questions competent people ask during daylight hours. If you're wondering what questions I would have asked, stay with me because Marcus Caney was about to receive a very expensive education. The transition itself felt unreal. At 1:47 a.m., I began systematically transferring access credentials for systems I had built, optimized, and monitored for over a decade. Production dashboards, supplier communication networks, equipment diagnostics, quality control protocols, layer upon layer of operational infrastructure that required constant attention to function correctly. Each transfer felt like disconnecting life support from a patient who still needed intensive care. At 2:23 a.m., my phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but the Titan exchange was unmistakable. Ms. Hayes, this is Marcus Kane. I understand you've been managing overnight operations. I wanted to introduce myself and get a quick briefing on the current status. He sounded younger than I'd expected, confident in the way people are when they've been told they're ready. Hello, Marcus. I've transferred all access credentials as requested. You should have full operational oversight now. Great. Can you give me a quick overview of what's happening tonight? Any immediate concerns I should know about? I glanced at monitors I was no longer authorized to touch. You'll need to check the production dashboards for current status. I'm no longer involved in operational decisions. Right, of course, but just to get oriented, are there any critical issues I should prioritize? The question confirmed everything. Marcus Kane had been handed responsibility with no preparation for the reality he was stepping into. You'll want to review production schedules, supplier delivery statuses, and equipment alerts. Detroit is experiencing timing issues with the Honda shipment. Atlanta has a quality control flag on Ford components. Phoenix is dealing with a supplier delay affecting tomorrow's GM delivery. Okay, Detroit, Atlanta, Phoenix, Honda, Ford, GM. Got it. Anything else I should watch for? Anything else? 11 years of operational insight reduced to a casual follow-up. Monitor the overnight shift supervisors. They can handle routine decisions, but escalations require centralized oversight. Perfect. And if I have questions, can I reach you tonight? I paused, thinking of Daniel's confidence that Marcus could manage independently. Marcus, I'm no longer employed by Titan as of 2 hours ago. You'll need to coordinate with plant managers and supervisors. The silence stretched. You're no longer employed? As of 10:05 a.m. yesterday. Who's been managing operations? I thought I was taking over tomorrow. You took over at 2 a.m. when I transferred access credentials. Another pause. I think there's been a miscommunication. I wasn't expecting to start tonight. I haven't been briefed on current operations. And there it was. Daniel Blackwood had fired the person running active operations and handed responsibility to someone unprepared to take over in the middle of overnight production that couldn't stop. Marcus, I suggest contacting Daniel or HR to clarify your responsibilities. I'm no longer in a position to provide guidance. Right. Okay. Thank you. After the call ended, I sat alone in the dark, city lights glowing beyond my window, thinking about 3 massive production facilities now operating without the oversight they'd relied on for 11 years. $5.2 billion in output, running on tight margins and zero tolerance for error, now under the supervision of someone who hadn't even expected to start until morning. Daniel Blackwood wanted immediate administrative efficiency. He was about to learn the true cost of confusing convenience with competence. My phone buzzed with messages from plant supervisors asking for direction I was no longer authorized to give. I turned it off and went to bed. Whatever happened next was Marcus Kane's responsibility. The first crisis hit at 4:17 a.m., which I knew because my personal phone began ringing with calls from plant supervisors who had my direct number for emergencies, but apparently couldn't reach Marcus. I didn't answer any of them. By 6:30 a.m., I had 14 missed calls and 23 text messages from various Titan employees, ranging from shift supervisors asking for guidance to plant managers requesting clarification on delivery priorities, questions that should have gone to Marcus Kane, but apparently weren't being answered. At 7:45 a.m., Daniel Blackwood called my personal phone. "Victoria, we have some operational issues that require your immediate assistance." "Good morning, Daniel. I'm no longer employed by Titan as of 10:05 a.m. yesterday. You'll need to coordinate operational support through Marcus Kane." "Marcus is having some difficulty getting oriented." Difficulty getting oriented? 6 hours after taking responsibility for $5.2 billion worth of production operations. "Daniel, you terminated my employment for administrative efficiency reasons. I'm not available for transition assistance. This is temporary consultation work. We're prepared to pay emergency consulting rates." Emergency consulting rates for fixing problems created by firing me in the middle of active operations. "I'm not available for consulting work. I said I'm exploring other opportunities." Other opportunities? Yes, operational expertise becomes highly sought after when it suddenly becomes available. What I didn't mention was that my phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. with calls from Titan's competitors, all of whom had heard through industry channels that I was no longer with the company. Automotive manufacturing is a small community, and news travels fast when someone with my track record becomes available. "Victoria, we need to discuss this situation. Can you come in this morning?" "I don't think that would be appropriate. Marcus Kane is fully prepared to handle operational challenges." According to yesterday's conversation, the situation has become more complex than anticipated. More complex than anticipated? Translation: everything was falling apart without the person who actually knew how it worked. I'm sure Marcus will figure it out. He brings fresh perspective to operational challenges. "Remember, Victoria, we're willing to discuss reinstatement with improved terms." Reinstatement after firing me at 10:05 a.m. for administrative efficiency? "Daniel, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in returning to a position that can be eliminated on 3 minutes' notice for administrative convenience." What would it take? I looked out my kitchen window at the morning traffic, thinking about the 11 years I'd spent building operational systems that Daniel Blackwood had just discovered he couldn't function without. It would take a time machine, Daniel. You can't eliminate institutional knowledge and then expect to rent it back when you realize you need it. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced since leaving corporate management: complete control over my professional future. They'd fired me to streamline operations, and now they were learning that some operations can't be streamlined without the expertise that make them work. The education was expensive, but exactly what they'd paid for. Ever notice how streamlined operations usually just means operations without the people who understand them? If you're enjoying this lesson in cause and effect, drop a comment about your own experiences with management decisions that prioritized convenience over competence. The complete collapse of Titan Manufacturing's operations took exactly 18 hours and 43 minutes. I watched it unfold from my new favorite coffee shop in downtown Detroit, deliberately staying visible while 3 production facilities worth $5.2 billion learned what happens when operational expertise is eliminated for administrative efficiency. The first domino fell at 9:47 a.m., when the Detroit plant's main assembly line shut down due to what Marcus Kane later described as unexpected equipment coordination issues. In operational terms, this meant Marcus hadn't grasped the delicate timing sequence I'd developed for coordinating 3 different supplier deliveries with 2 assembly stations and 1 quality-controlled checkpoint. When Supplier A's delivery arrived 30 minutes early, Marcus approved immediate unloading without realizing Supplier B's components needed to be staged first to maintain proper assembly flow. The result was a logistics bottleneck that backed up the entire production line and triggered automatic safety shutdowns when workers couldn't access the proper staging areas. What should have been a simple supplier coordination became a 4-hour shutdown, delaying the Honda delivery by 6 hours and costing approximately $340,000 in missed production targets. I learned about this not from panicked phone calls, but from LinkedIn messages from former colleagues expressing shock that communication breakdowns were happening so soon after my departure. The second domino fell at 2:15 p.m., when the Atlanta plant's quality control system flagged defective components that should have been caught during incoming inspection. The problem wasn't with the components themselves, but with Marcus's decision to skip the specialized testing protocol I'd developed for this supplier. Hartwell Automotive had a history of temperature-sensitive packaging that required precise handling procedures. I had learned this over 3 years working with their logistics team and had created testing protocols that caught problems before they reached assembly. Marcus apparently deemed these protocols unnecessarily complex and instructed the Atlanta team to use standard testing procedures. The result was 47 defective components passing initial inspection, contaminating an entire production batch worth $1.2 million. Here's something business school doesn't teach you. Institutional knowledge isn't just documentation, it's understanding why the documentation exists. If you're enjoying this lesson unfolding in real time, hit that subscribe button because we're about to see what happens when 3 plants lose coordination simultaneously. By 4:30 p.m., the Phoenix plant was experiencing what industry professionals call a cascade failure. Marcus had tried to compensate for the Detroit and Atlanta delays by accelerating Phoenix's production schedule without realizing Phoenix's operations were specifically calibrated to support the other 2 facilities. Phoenix didn't just manufacture components, it produced specialized subassemblies required by both Detroit and Atlanta. When Marcus ordered Phoenix to prioritize their own deliveries over supporting the other plants, he unknowingly severed the coordination that kept all 3 facilities synchronized. The result was Phoenix producing components Detroit and Atlanta couldn't use, while Detroit and Atlanta waited for components Phoenix wasn't producing. By 6 p.m., all 3 plants were operating at less than 30% capacity, with production schedules misaligned with delivery commitments. I learned the full scope of the crisis from an unexpected source, my former assistant, Jennifer Walsh, who called my personal phone at 6:47 p.m. "Victoria, I probably shouldn't be calling you, but the situation here is completely insane. Marcus has been in emergency meetings all day and no one knows how to fix what's happening." "What exactly is happening?" I asked. "All 3 plants are basically shut down. Detroit can't finish the Honda order, Atlanta scrapped an entire production run, and Phoenix is making parts that nobody needs. The plant managers are asking for guidance, but Marcus keeps saying he needs time to assess the operational landscape." Assess the operational landscape, while $5.2 billion worth of production infrastructure sat idle because the person who actually understood the landscape had been eliminated for administrative efficiency. Has anyone contacted the clients about delivery delays? That's the worst part. Marcus says we should wait until tomorrow to see if the situation improves before notifying clients. But Victoria, we're talking about Honda, Ford, and GM. These aren't companies that tolerate surprise delays. No, they weren't. Automotive manufacturers operate on just-in-time delivery schedules with zero tolerance for supplier failures. Missing delivery commitments didn't just cost money, it damaged relationships that had taken years to build. "Jennifer, I appreciate you calling, but I'm not in a position to provide guidance anymore. I know, it's just everyone's asking what you would do in this situation." What I would do was exactly what I'd been doing for 11 years: coordinate between plants, communicate with suppliers, manage client expectations, and maintain the operational rhythm that kept everything synchronized. But Daniel Blackwood decided that coordination was too expensive to maintain. "Jennifer, the situation will resolve itself one way or another. Marcus has the authority and responsibility to make operational decisions now. But what if he can't fix it?" That was the question Daniel Blackwood should have asked before eliminating the person who actually knew how to prevent these problems in the first place. By Thursday morning, the industry reaction began appearing in trade publications. Titan Manufacturing experiences multi-plant production disruptions, ran in Automotive Supply Chain Weekly, followed by analyses in Manufacturing Today and Industrial Operations Quarterly. The articles were diplomatically worded, but the message was clear. Titan was experiencing operational failures that affected major automotive clients and raised serious questions about their ability to maintain delivery commitments. By Friday afternoon, the financial impact became visible. Titan's stock had dropped 12% on investor concerns about production reliability, while competitor shares rose on speculation that Titan's problems would drive business elsewhere. But the knockout punch came from the clients themselves. Honda issued a formal notice of contract review, citing reliability concerns in supplier operations. Ford implemented emergency contingency planning to source critical components from alternative suppliers, and GM's procurement department sent what amounted to a warning letter, stressing the importance of delivery schedule adherence. In 4 days, Marcus Caney had managed to damage relationships that had taken 11 years to build. You know what's wild about operational expertise? When it's there, everything looks easy. When it's not there, everything looks impossible. If you've ever watched inexperienced try to manage complex systems, drop a comment about how that worked out. The call I'd been expecting came Friday evening, not from Daniel Blackwood this time, but from Titan's board of directors, represented by chairwoman Catherine Morrison. Ms. Hayes, I'm calling to discuss a potential consulting engagement that would help Titan address some operational challenges we're experiencing. Consulting engagement? Corporate speak for, please fix the disaster we created by firing you. What kind of challenges are you experiencing? Multi-facility coordination issues affecting production efficiency and client delivery schedules. The board believed my expertise could help resolve these complications. 4 days of production failures that had cost millions in lost revenue and damaged relationships with major automotive manufacturers. Mrs. Morrison, what specifically is Titan looking for in this consulting arrangement? Immediate operational assessment and recommendations for stabilizing production across all 3 facilities. We're prepared to offer premium consulting rates for expedited service. Premium consulting rates for fixing problems that wouldn't exist if they hadn't eliminated the person who actually prevented them. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not available for consulting work. Not available, Ms. Hayes. We're talking significant compensation for helping resolve a temporary situation. I'm not available because I've accepted a position elsewhere. Meridian Industrial Systems offered me a role as VP of Operations, with responsibility for building their new automotive supply division. The silence on the other end told me everything. Meridian Industrial was Titan's largest competitor, and they had just hired away the person who understood Titan's operational vulnerabilities better than anyone. Ms. Hayes, surely we can discuss terms competitive with any other offer. Mrs. Morrison, 4 days ago, Titan fired me at 10:05 a.m. for administrative efficiency. Today, you're offering premium rates to fix the problems that decision created. What's changed isn't my availability, it's your understanding of what operational expertise is actually worth. What would it take to bring me back? I looked out my apartment window at the Detroit skyline, thinking about the 11 years I'd spent building systems that Daniel Blackwood had destroyed in a single midnight phone call. It would take competent leadership that understands the difference between cutting costs and cutting capabilities. Meridian Industrial offered that. Titan apparently didn't. The final chapter of Titan's operational collapse played out over the following month. Unable to restore coordination between their 3 plants, they were forced to bring in emergency consulting teams at costs exceeding my annual salary within 2 weeks. The consultants were competent, but temporary. Every solution they implemented required ongoing maintenance and optimization that Titan no longer had the internal expertise to provide. Meanwhile, Meridian Industrial was building exactly the kind of operation I'd always envisioned. Proper coordination between facilities, comprehensive supplier relationships, and leadership that understood operational excellence required ongoing investment in the people who created it. 6 months later, Meridian Industrial won the contract to supply Honda's new electric vehicle line, a $2.3 billion deal Titan had been favored to win before their operational reliability came into question. I received a final contact from Titan 9 months after my termination. Daniel Blackwood calling from what sounded like a much smaller office, requesting a meeting to discuss lessons learned and potential future collaboration. I declined politely. Some lessons are too expensive to teach twice. Sometimes the most expensive business education comes from learning the difference between having operations and understanding them. Daniel taught me that expertise can't be eliminated and then rented back when convenient. Meridian taught me that the right leadership recognizes operational knowledge as strategic advantage rather than administrative overhead. If you made it this far, you clearly understand that real operations management isn't about cutting costs. It's about creating value through coordination, expertise, and institutional knowledge. Drop a comment if you've ever watched leadership confuse efficiency with elimination, and hit subscribe if you believe expertise should be valued before it walks out the door. They fired me to streamline operations. Instead, they learned that some operations require the expertise to understand them, and some expertise can't be replaced with good intentions and fresh perspectives. The education cost them $5.2 billion in operational capability, but it was priceless for everyone who learned that cutting operational expertise doesn't optimize anything. It just ensures that someone else will profit from opportunities you can no longer manage. The final vindication came 2 years later, when Titan Manufacturing was acquired by a Chinese conglomerate for 60% below peak valuation. Industry analysts specifically cited operational instability and the loss of institutional knowledge as key factors that weakened the company's market position. The acquisition announcement included a telling detail. The new owner's first priority was rebuilding operational expertise and supplier relationships compromised during recent organizational transitions. Meanwhile, Meridian Industrial Systems, under my leadership, had become the dominant automotive supplier in the Great Lakes region. Our 3 new facilities were generating $7.8 billion in annual revenue, and we'd won contracts from every major automaker Titan had lost. Within 18 months, business schools were teaching this case study, The Midnight Termination, how operational expertise became competitive advantage, became required reading in several MBA programs focusing on manufacturing management. Daniel Blackwood never recovered professionally. After Titan's acquisition, he spent 2 years in consulting before taking a significantly reduced role at a mid-tier manufacturing company. Industry colleagues later told me he became obsessed with operational documentation and knowledge retention. Lessons learned too late. I kept one memento from my Titan years, the final quarterly report showing record operational efficiency numbers, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that expertise isn't overhead. It's the foundation that everything else depends on.